I struggled with my telephoto lens a lot when I started with landscape photography. The photos, they wouldn't be sharp or the subject would be completely uninteresting. I struggled both technically and compositionally with my telephoto lens, but I found a few tricks and exercises that drastically helped me take both sharper images and much more impactful images. The first part is getting sharper photos. This is actually a pretty easy fix. Here's my step-by-step process that works every single time. First, put your camera on a sturdy tripod. When you try to handhold your camera and your telephoto lens, you have to worry about camera shake. You have to make sure your shutter speed is higher than what you would normally need for a tripod. You have to use the inverse rule, which is 1 over your focal length. So if you're shooting at like 200 millimeters, your minimum shutter speed is going to be about 1/200th of a second or faster. And in low light situations, you really have to start bumping up that ISO to get that correct exposure, and you start to introduce a little bit of noise in the process. Now, a tripod, of course, is going to eliminate the need for that faster shutter speed. You have the added benefit of analyzing your composition, making small adjustments to fine-tune your idea. Next, make sure to turn off VR on your lens and your camera. This is a big one that everybody forgets to do at some point. Now, if you have your camera on a tripod but there's still plenty of light, your shutter speed may be fast enough that this maybe won't matter. But once you start to reach around that 1/2 second to 1 second shutter speed, as the light starts to get lower, your images are without a doubt going to be blurry if you still have that vibration reduction on. That's because the VR is searching for camera movement and trying to constantly compensate. So if there isn't any movement, the VR is going to be causing the movement. The next culprit to camera shake is pressing the shutter button. It happens. When you move your finger and press down, it can cause the camera to shake. So either use a self-timer, anything from like 2 to 5 seconds, getting yourself a shutter release device, or use a smartphone app to take photos so you don't have to touch your camera at all. The last tip for the technical part of this is remove your lens hood when it's windy. It's thin and protrudes out from the bulky part of the lens. Wind can induce that camera shake. It's at the very end of your camera, furthest away from where it's secured on the tripod. So physically speaking, it's going to take much less force to move the camera at the end with the lens hood because it sticks out further than the solid, heavy part of the lens. The further out you go, the less force it's going to take to move the camera. Now let's talk about composition and finding interesting subjects. I struggled with finding strong compositions when I started out. It was hard for me to visualize what something would look like with a telephoto lens. So this simple exercise helped me a lot. And that is, look through the lens at the landscape. Before you put your camera on a tripod, just look through the viewfinder. I know it sounds a bit simple, but this exercise is so effective. You also need to understand what the strength of a telephoto lens is. You have a giant landscape. It's like a big puzzle. But instead of trying to include all of it, you're just zooming in to one piece. From a storytelling perspective, think of it as finding an interesting side character of a larger story and just telling the story of that one character. This makes one of the strengths of the telephoto lens is simplifying your subject. It's much easier to have a simple concept with this lens because it forces you to focus on one thing. The viewer sees exactly what you want them to see. Maybe it's the layers of a landscape, or maybe it's just some abstract shapes that catch your eye, the light hitting one area that really sticks out. So try these out next time you're out using a telephoto lens. They helped me tremendously, and I think they're going to help you too. Now, if you struggle with where to focus, click here and I will see you in the next video.